Hey everybody, today we've got a hypothetical 2024 matchup. This time it's Governor of North Carolina Roy Cooper against a U.S. Senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul. And this was suggested to me a long time ago in the comments. I'm still slowly doing these on occasion, but the more we get into election season, the more I'm going to want to focus on that. So let's try to dive into this. It's difficult, but I'm going to start by plugging in the safe states for both sides. And while we do that, we could talk a little bit more about it. So Roy Cooper, he's considered a moderate Democrat. He's going to be in line with the establishment. I don't think he's exciting. I think he comes off as fairly non-threatening. He would definitely struggle to get progressives to turn out, but I think all he really has to do is stake out a couple of popular economic positions. It's just going to be something like a minimum wage increase and expanding healthcare access. He's also probably going to lean into the abortion issue, but if he's tied to Joe Biden or the national economy and it's bad at the time, that's something else that could hurt Cooper. Now, Rand Paul, he's considered more libertarian, so that has some strengths and some weaknesses. I'm sure he's going to be tied to Donald Trump and have to deal with questions about that, but I would assume he would lean more into an America First type of campaign, cutting back spending overseas, focusing on U.S. citizens, securing the border. Those are things I think would help Paul. So we can also plug in the likely states. There's not going to be anything too shocking here. Cooper's going to get Colorado, Minnesota, and Virginia, and let's also give Cooper Maine at large. Colorado just barely gets down under 10. Again, I don't think he's going to excite any progressive voters. Meanwhile, Rand Paul, I don't think he's the worst fit for this state. Minnesota, I think, is borderline lean likely. Paul, I think, could do a little bit better than some other Republicans, but overall, Cooper still going to win the state comfortably. Same in Virginia. Maybe it does get more narrow, but as of now, I'm going to leave that at likely for Cooper. The likely states for Paul are going to be Texas, Iowa, Ohio, and Florida. I don't think much needs to be said there. Those are typical ratings for most Republicans. He's also going to get Maine's 2nd congressional district. Now, how about the lean states? Well, Cooper is going to get New Mexico. This was borderline lean likely for me. I had it at likely, but I figured they elected Gary Johnson there twice. Maybe that still resonates enough to get that down to about a 4.8% margin for Cooper. Now, all the other states are the battlegrounds, and I think would be very narrow margins. So a lot of these are going to be interchangeable ratings. But let's start in Nevada. I really was not sure about this. I could definitely see Cooper winning it, but his brand in North Carolina, I'm not sure how well that's going to work in a place like Clark County. Rand Paul might have just the right mix to be able to do well enough to win the state, so it could go either way, but I did settle on a tilt for Paul. Next door in Arizona, this is another state where I think Cooper is non-threatening enough to win the state if he were going up against a Trump-style Republican. Rand Paul, I think, is unique enough to be able to carry the state. And of course, the border, I think, is an issue here, so it could go 3 or 4 points, but I kept it at a tilt for Paul. Also, we've got Nebraska 2nd. This is one that I think would be close. Given the presidential trends here, I am going to throw it to Roy Cooper by a tilt margin. Next, let's go to Wisconsin. Trying to consider all the issues, the different demographics, the different locations. It's a balancing act, but I settled on a tilt for Paul. Next door in Michigan, this is where I think the economics are going to be a little bit more favorable for Cooper. Not a lot, but just enough for him to win the state by a tilt margin. In Pennsylvania, it's going to be the same story. It all depends on a variety of different factors, but I went with a tilt for Cooper. Back into the Northeast into New Hampshire. This is a little bit more of an independent, potentially libertarian-minded state. That's where Rand Paul actually becomes competitive here. So he's definitely in this thing, but the Democrats are going to be stronger here on a presidential level, so it's close, but I went with about a 1-point tilt margin for Cooper. So we've got 2 states left. Let's go down to Georgia. These guys are both from southern states. North Carolina technically borders Georgia. Maybe that helps Cooper just a little bit more. So it really depends on the national environment. I don't think Cooper would do too bad in the Atlanta suburbs, but I think the state might still be just a little bit too red overall. So I did give it to Rand Paul by a tilt margin. Maybe he wins it by 3 or 4. The last state is North Carolina. This is Roy Cooper's home state. The last couple of presidential cycles, it's been close. Roy Cooper, unless he's scandal-plagued during the election, he's got to get a little bit of a home state bounce. So that is actually going to be enough for this state to flip. Maybe he gets more of a bounce than I think, and he wins it by 2 or 3. But I also think Paul would do pretty well himself. So it is going to go to Cooper by a tilt margin. So that's it. The final total comes out to 276 for Roy Cooper, 262 for Rand Paul. And as I said throughout this video, like with many elections, it absolutely could go either way. There's a lot of different factors and variables that you might or might not emphasize. Maybe you think abortion is a much bigger deal. Maybe you think Rand Paul is more off-putting and has no charisma. Maybe you think crime and the economy are bigger issues and that's going to put Paul back over the top. You could go on and on and on about this, but I think the running mate would be a factor. Of course, the national economic sentiment, but whatever else is happening in the country at the time, who knows exactly how they would run their campaigns. I don't think either of these guys are really all that exciting. Paul's going to have to try to get out the Trump base. Cooper's going to try to have to get taking out the progressives. I think Cooper's going to struggle with that, but I think he could do well enough in the suburbs. Paul should be able to win over some independents. There's a lot of disaffected voters out there, but I don't think Rand Paul is on the same level as Ron Paul. So maybe the libertarians come out for Paul. Maybe they think he's not libertarian enough. Maybe voters are just so tired of Biden and the current administration that Paul wins it. Maybe Trump is somehow still a significant factor and that ends up hurting Paul, and Cooper does a little bit better. You could have almost any scenario you'd like. I'd probably have a different map if I made this again, but I try to even everything out, and this is what I settled on. Cooper ends up barely winning it, but it's completely up for grabs. So let me know in the comments, who do you think would win this matchup? Would Cooper fall flat and Paul would ignite a bunch of new voters? Or do you think Cooper has the right elements to be able to secure the White House? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.